Welcome into our Women's World Cup show here on ESPN FC. Sophie, Lawson, Jeff Carlisle with us, and also Julien. My name is Kay Murray. Let's get straight to it. The USA are out of the World Cup, knocked out on penalties by Sweden. It's the first time they are knocked out of a Women's World Cup before the semi-final stage. Jeff Carlisle, your initial thoughts?
I mean, this game borders on ironic overload. I mean, the U.S. had looked so poor in the group stage, and I didn't really give the U.S. much of a chance to prevail in this game. But I mean, they played their best game of the tournament by far. I mean, Vlatko Andonovski's decision to go with a double pivot in midfield with Emily Sonnet and Andy Sullivan. I mean, it was a master stroke. I mean, the U.S. dominated from start to finish, and only the play of the Swedish keeper, Zorica Musovic. I mean, she was the difference. I mean, she saved Sweden so many times. And then in the shootout, I mean, it had to be seen to be believed, because it was there for the U.S. I mean, much like this game, it was there for the taking, and they couldn't quite keep it in their hands. They couldn't just grab hold of it and finally make it their own. And so it's just it's an amazing way to go out for the U.S. It's just crushing, and you hope that the players, like Sophia Smith, who missed her attempt, can bounce back from this.
Yeah, and obviously Megan Rapinoe missing her attempt too, and I'm sure that she'll be able to put an arm around that young player and help her bounce back from this. Jules, what were your thoughts on that dramatic penalty shootout?
Incredible. It felt watching it on television that there was always going to be a twist, and it looked like the USA were cruising, and they was so good in goal, and then obviously Rapinoe scores the two ahead, and they're almost there really, and then she misses. And then Sophia Smith can win it, and she misses as well. But it's a terrible penalty from her. And then after that, it feels a bit like dynamic and the momentum has changed a little bit. And, this is a Sweden team, for example, that lost the Olympic final on penalties against Canada. So maybe that experience in a way was beneficial for them. I don't know, because in the end, like Jeff said, it was so much in the hands of the US players. Like they literally had the game in their hands, in their feet, in their everywhere. Really, they could not lose it. And yet somehow lose it by 1 millimeter, because we saw the goal line technology on the last penalty, and the hurting goal is literally a millimeter. And football is a marginal sport. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose by a centimeter, but a millimeter like that in a World Cup penalty shootout, this is never seen before.
Yeah, it's interesting as well, Jeff, that you mentioned the irony as well, and this being their best game so far. What do you think the post-mortem is going to be like? Where are they going to start with what went wrong for them in order to go forward again and become the force that they have been in international football?
Well, I mean, I think the first task is really to look at the future of Vlatko Andonovski. Granted, this was the best they played. I mean, he did get his tactics right in this game. But if you look at the tournament in its entirety, I mean, this was a U.S. team that was very much less than the sum of its parts. And, that was also the case in the Olympics. So in two major tournaments under Vlatko Andonovski, this team has not looked good when you look at the totality of the tournament. And so, I think I don't expect him to survive this. I really don't. Now, he's very close to the U.S. Women's National Team GM, Kate Markgraf. I mean, she hired Vlatko Andonovski. She's really kind of hitched her executive career in the USSF to this, and so it's going to be interesting, the decision that gets made. I've also heard that Matt Crocker is going to have a huge say into as to whether Vlatko Andonovski continues, and he's only been on the job for a month or two at best. And so, but I don't expect him to survive. I mean, he's had two opportunities in major tournaments, and, the U.S. looked horrible at the Olympics, and, they've now gotten their earliest exit ever from a World Cup. And so I just don't think he's going to be able to survive that.
Jeff, do you think there have been any names that you've heard that could be in charge of the future of the U.S. Women's National Team in terms of being the manager?
Well, I mean, Laura Harvey has been around the program for a lot of years. And so, I would expect them to talk to her. Serena Weigman, I mean, she's done great things with England. And really, when it comes to the U.S. women's program, I don't think money is any object. I mean, I think if they wanted someone bad enough, they could probably make it worth that coach's while to at least listen, if not hire them. So, I mean, those are the first two names that kind of jump out at me. But, you know, obviously the powers that be within the U.S. Soccer Federation have a decision to make. And so, you know, we'll see what kind of decision they end up making.
Sophie Lawson's in Melbourne for us, hoping to get word from her in just a moment. Yes, there she is. Lovely to speak to you and have you here, Sophie. So let's just take your assessment on the US in this World Cup so far overall and that dramatic ending for them and exit.
I think, you know, from what I could hear of Jeff, sorry, technical issues. From what I could hear of Jeff, I think he was sort of pretty much on the nose. They played their best game. We saw the double pivot that worked so well, whereas in the group stage, they didn't quite have that flow, that the balance that allowed, say, Horan to get forward and attack as she did. And it's just one of those games where you should win, but sometimes you don't. And I think if you look at sort of like US history in major tournaments, usually they get through those games when maybe they shouldn't win, but they find something. This felt like probably wasn't going to happen. And, you know, as we've talked about, they've never really looked their best under Vlatko. The question is where they go from here. Again, as Jeff says, you're potentially looking at someone like Laura Harvey, but is she going to come in and do the same thing Vlatko did and was ultimately quite disappointing in this role? So I think there's big questions to be asked of the US coming out the back end of this tournament, just in terms of the direction they want to go in, if they want more of the same, if it's better to look outside of the bubble and just trying to work out who they are, because we always say that the rest of the world is catching up. We're seeing it a bit more in this tournament, but you've got these fantastic players and you've got to have the right coach to really showcase their abilities. I don't think we've seen that in the last few years.
Jules, were you nodding at the Serena Wiegman mention?
Yeah, I think she should be in the mix for sure. I mean, Laura Harvey makes a lot of sense, obviously. I just think this is a humiliation. I know they played well and I know they were the better team and they should have won. And it's one of those games where you could have played 3 hours and you would have never scored. But I don't think you can switch on. This is not what major tournaments are about. If you don't play well and you get into a game like this against a good team, they're a good team. They're a really good team, Sweden. It's hard to switch it on when you haven't scored against Portugal, not even looking nowhere near. You struggle against the Dutch as well. You scored on a set piece. Let's put aside the first game anyway. It's hard, I think. You know, Alex Morgan in good positions. We saw Sophia Smith in good position. We saw Williams. So they was there. But it's hard to switch it on. I just think it's not good enough. So for me, there's no way Vlatko should stay or should be allowed to stay anyway. And then, like Jeff and Sophie said, it depends what direction you want to go. There's clearly a good young generation coming through, and maybe you need a coach as well that can maybe younger with new ideas, different ideas, and that can also bring that generation through.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.